Two easy recipes. I am really loving the caramel addition to the middle though. We are going to take a quick break from the Classic Cakes Veganized series to make this pralines and cream cake. The idea came from my last recipe in the Classic Cake series for vegan Paris breast. If you guys haven't seen that one, it's definitely worth a look. It is so incredibly delicious. And so the idea for this cake stemmed from that, because for that recipe, the Paris breast pastry is filled with a hazelnut praline creme mousseline. So I have already made my buttercream recipe, to which I've added the praline paste. Now I did cut back on some of the sugar in the buttercream recipe to compensate for that super sweetness that the praline paste will impart, because if you did watch that recipe, it's essentially just making a caramel with sugar and adding in the nuts, and it's sort of like a brittle. It starts out as a brittle, but then you go ahead and put it into the food processor and just process it down to a paste, which can then be incorporated into pretty much anything. So we're just going to build a really quick but delicious pralines and cream cake with some recipes that you guys already know. Maybe I should say, hopefully you know this recipe, because it is my famous vanilla cake recipe. It's actually a recipe out of my cookbook, aptly named Super Easy Vanilla Cake, because it really doesn't get any easier than this. I'm pretty much using it for all my recipes that require a vanilla sponge cake base. And I mean, you've seen me make it before, and if you haven't, if you're new here to my channel, welcome. All the recipes are at Gretchen'sVeganBakery.com. But essentially, this is a one bowl mix where you just pour all of the liquids into the dry ingredients, and that's really how simple it is. So the base for this pralines and cream cake is this amazing vanilla cake recipe that I am going to trim just slightly. It does dome a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of trim off those domes. And of course, never throw out your cake scraps. You can use them for other projects in the future. Just put them in the freezer like I do. I mean, I have a literal freezer full of bakery scraps and nuts and cake trimmings and all kinds of things that you just never know when you can incorporate them into something else. Now, I did get a little bit excited about getting to this cake building that I popped my cake out of the pan too early, and it did break. So that's okay though. Rather than, starting over, I figured let me just show you guys what you can do if that does happen. I mean, it's not that bad. If it was worse than that, I may have had to bake a whole other recipe, but for the most part, that's not too bad. But I am still going to trim off the tops of this one. And the only trick that I'm going to do to sort of make sure that nobody ever knows that that happened is make sure that you use the broken layer as your bottom layer. You wouldn't want to use a broken cake layer for the middle or the top, because it's just going to have a tendency to do what it's doing right now once it's iced. But if you do use it as the base layer, we can sort of glue that together with some buttercream and no one will ever know. So let's first do a little bit of surgery on that cake piece that was broken to make sure that that's not going to go anywhere once we start filling our cake. So, like I said, pralines are essentially just a caramel that has nuts folded into it, and typically it is a pecan. Especially down south, you're gonna hear that pralines and cream is definitely the pecan nut. So, but really you can use any nut that you want or that you have. And like I said, this would be a super sweet overload cake had I not taken out about 2 cups of the icing sugar from the buttercream recipe. Now I do have about 5 different buttercream recipes on my website for you to choose from. So I always use my American style buttercream. It's just so easy and I really do love it. And so as you see, I'm adding some caramel to the center of this cake so that when we do cut into it, it's not just plain boring old buttercream filling, but we do have a little bit of a caramel that's going to kind of drip out of each layer. So it is a really simple project because it is just a buttercream recipe, your vanilla cake, and the praline really does cook up really quickly. And you can really do this whole project from start to finish in a matter of just a couple hours, but I do like to break it up into 2 days so that it's not just so crazy in the kitchen all day on one day. Not to mention, I do like to have my cakes in the refrigerator overnight so they get really cold and have less of a tendency to crack as if they would if you had just really popped these out of the oven. The hardest part is always getting a decent slice. The first one is always the one that I eat because it doesn't look very good. Hopefully this one will look okay. Ooh, that looks delicious. So 2 easy recipes. I am really loving the caramel addition to the middle though. So that would be 3 recipes. Actually 4. Okay, it's 4 recipes, but it's so worth it. It is so perfect. So all of these recipes on their own are quite simple to make. With my super easy vanilla cake recipe, a praline paste to add to your favorite buttercream recipe, and then the caramel on the inside is completely optional, but let me tell you, it is so making this cake perfection. So be sure to head over to GretchensVeganBakery.com to grab all of the recipes in written printable form with so much more information about how to have no-fail results with my recipes every time. I offer substitutions and just a lot of notes for success so that you can become the best vegan baker you can be. So thanks so much everybody for watching. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss all the new recipes coming out every week. And if you are subscribed, thank you guys so much for being with me here every week. A great big special thank you to my patrons on Patreon as always, and my pals in PayPal for their continued support. The ingredients to test and execute these recipes are not cheap, as you know, and so for as little as a cup of coffee a month, you too could help support this channel. Just click the links below to find out how. All right, and until next time, happy vegan baking, guys. Bye for now.